Hello folks, I'm Pamela Young and this is Thrive 2030 brought to you by growthcurv. And my guest today is David Downs, who is the CEO of this amazing business platform called New Zealand Story. Good morning. How are you, David, today?
Well, kia ora, as we say in New Zealand. Very well, thank you.
Kia ora to you too, and I'm so pleased that you've made some time for us. Very excited to have a look at your business and share it with the world. Now, folks, David has been at New Zealand Story as its CEO for about 4 years, but he spent 12 years with NZTE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is a government department to help New Zealand businesses to grow both internally and externally. And he has a very big international career. Prior to that, he spent some time in Singapore with Microsoft, so in the international corporate world. And he currently is the chair of an organisation in New Zealand called Icehouse, which is there to support businesses on their growth journey. Have I forgotten anything, David?
Oh, that's pretty good. You're pretty good. Yes, I do a lot of things, a variety of things. Some would say I have a short attention span.
Okay. Now, it's okay for me to also tell folks that you are a survivor of cancer and you have an amazing story which people can find on TEDx. And the other thing, folks, if you do go to TEDx and look for David's amazing cancer survival story, you'll be highly entertained for a full 15 minutes because he's also a stand-up comedian. Aren't you, David?
I like to put X in there in case, I don't come across that well, but that was a long time ago in my youth.
Well, you're still a very funny man, so I highly recommend people go to TEDx and hear your story. It's very inspiring. So today, let's talk a little bit about New Zealand Story and why it was set up and what does it do. So let's start with the why.
By the way, I just have to say I love the backdrops behind us both. They're two different aspects of New Zealand. That sort of talks a little bit about to the why. So
Yes.
New Zealand Story is a government organization as well. Our role is to help the rest of the world understand more about New Zealand. New Zealand is well loved, and we can say this through our research, by the way. It's not just my opinion.
Yes.
Lots of people have this kind of utopian view of New Zealand being this beautiful place in the bottom of the South Pacific and lakes, rivers, mountains, Lord of the Rings was shot there. That's the sort of messaging we get all the time. But we also are a centre of innovation and science. We launch rockets from New Zealand. We have incredible sports teams and arts and culture. And that's the sort of thing that's important for the rest of the world to know more about as well. So New Zealand Story's role is to expand the global reputation of New Zealand.
Yes.
We're a brand agency, if you like, for the country. And many countries around the world have brand agencies like us. It's protecting the brand, growing the brand, and through that, growing the value of the companies that come from New Zealand as well. Because New Zealand confers, when you come from New Zealand, that your products and services can be worth more.
Yes, of course. Now, once upon a time, New Zealand was known for sheep. It's the thing that's on everybody's mind, and forestry, primary industry.
Yes.
But there's been an enormous rise of technology exports in recent years, isn't there?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I mean, sheep still, we still have sheep. New Zealand is a very large, but people think of New Zealand as we're actually a large agricultural society, and that will never change. We've got 5 million people on a plot of land that is bigger than England and Ireland put together. Like it's a significantly large couple of islands, a few islands. But what we've over the last sort of 10, 20 years seen is a huge growth in innovation around science and technology.
Yes.
And it's always been in sort of the genes, the kind of the genetic makeup of New Zealanders to be innovative. Yeah, the very first settlers to New Zealand had to innovate. When you come to a country that's far away from your original home, whether that's in the Pacific Islands for the Māori people, our Indigenous people, or whether it's the English. When you come to a country like New Zealand, you're by yourself and you've got to learn how to be self-reliant and innovative. So that spirit's always been there. But what we've seen in the last 10 or so years is this explosion in terms of the number of technology companies exporting. Our space industry, for example, has just taken off, excuse the pun. We're now last year we were the second most prolific third most prolific launches of rockets into space, believe it or not, from New Zealand. So there's just been this explosion in terms of innovation and growth in science, which is again part of the New Zealand story that we need to get out there.
Now, recently, I think you mentioned somewhere along the line that New Zealand won an international award,
We did.
for being one of the best well-branded nations. Can you
Did.
on that?
Not one of, thank you, the.
Oh,
But yes,
the number one
yeah,
award for.
we did. I mean, it's interesting. As I say, our role in the system is to help grow the international reputation and brand of New Zealand. And
Mhm,
brand has many layers. It's to do with the values of the country and the messaging that comes from us and the imagery and the pictures, as well as things like, our national symbol, the silver fern up here.
mhm.
Um, and all of that wrapped together is part of how you build the brand, and we want New Zealand to be an attractive as a place to visit or study or invest or whatever it might be. And yes, last year we won the global brand of the year for the place, and that was a significant recognition, I suppose, of New Zealand's maturing of our brand.
Who
As you
awards such a thing?
well, it's awarded by an international organization called City Nation Place, which is like a group that basically looks at how place branding is done in all parts of the world.
Okay.
Many countries, as I said, have agencies like us. Many places and cities even have branding agencies. And we work with a lot of them. We learn from each other. And yeah, last year they recognized us as being the place brand of the year.
That's awesome. Who are the close followers? I mean, who are we being compared with?
Well, we sort of sit in a cluster actually, because we're a small, mature, first world country. And for us, it's brand is a really important part of our international growth. So there's a cluster of countries like us, Sweden, Denmark, Estonia is another one, Ireland, England, Costa Rica. So there's a sort of a grouping and more. There's a grouping of countries that have got that similar sort of attribute of being small, advanced economy.
Developed. Yeah.
And
It's
it and
interesting.
where brand is important, where it's important that the rest of the world understands that we're not a small island nation. We're actually a first world country. And those, brand, as I say, confers value for companies and people that come from this country. So those are similar sort of clustering of countries that we're with.
Right. And who are the contributors? Who are the people that set this organization up 13 years ago? And what was their motivation for it, right from?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, so New Zealand Story it's a joint venture of government agencies, which is quite interesting actually, that the government would bring together all of the international parts of New Zealand's government. So that's things like New Zealand Trade, obviously, but also tourism, Education New Zealand, which is responsible for bringing students into New Zealand, even our food export part, MPI, our foreign relations. So a bunch of organizations came together and said, look, we need something that sits above. The messaging sits above all of the individual work we do, So some of us are responsible for trade, some of us are responsible for investment, etc.
Mhm.
But actually, the messaging, the protocol, the kind of the brand we want to create has to confer value across all of those things. And that's when they came together and set up NZ Story. As you said, 13 years ago, it was been around. We've been around a while now.
Mhm.
And in terms of global sense, there are, as I say, there are many other organizations like us, but we're actually one of probably the originals doing the sort of work that we do.
Mhm. And when you come to work each day, what are your top of mind challenges that you face on behalf of New Zealanders who are trying to export their brands and their products overseas? What do you
Yeah, I
do
mean,
about?
we do, for example, a significant amount of research and listening. So we're looking at what is New Zealand's international reputation. We have, media reporting and monitoring of what are the stories about New Zealand that are happening in global press.
Mhm.
We do research ourselves, and we buy research as well about what are the perceptions of New Zealand. We're about to launch a new perception study in the next week or so, which will be about the US perceptions of New Zealand. And that's really important, because if you're an exporting company and you're trying to go into the US market, it's really important you know what they already think about you. What is their perception, and then how
Mhm.
do you tailor your messaging? So we'll think about that sort of thing as a research point of view. We look after the fern mark, as I mentioned earlier, the silver fern of New Zealand, which is our sort of trademark for the country. So we manage the licensing program. We make sure that the companies that use it are using it appropriately, etc.
Mhm.
And then we do a lot of media and comms and creating content and social media. And so my team's quite busy actually getting stories about New Zealand out into the world and helping, as I say, change that narrative. It's not just that New Zealand is a beautiful place to visit. That's
Mhm.
kind of a given. It is. But also it's a great place to buy products and services from, etc., etc. So that media is a part of how we get that messaging out there.
So yesterday I was at lunch at the Auckland Business Chamber, and they had Christopher Luxon speaking. I guess you might have been there.
No, I wasn't, but
Yes.
one of my team was. Yeah, that's the sort of
Okay.
thing we go to a
So
lot. Yes.
the Prime Minister doing a State of the Nation speech,
Yeah.
he identified the need for foreign direct investment to be greater and announced that the government was launching an initiative called Invest New Zealand to encourage foreign direct investors, as you just said, to come in and buy our products and services, or at least to help support the development of them here and to support organisations to develop so they could grow their exports. What is your role in that process?
Well, it's really important. I mean, investment is a really good example of where the New Zealand story is a critical part of our international appeal. Being able to show the rest of the world what we stand for, who we are as people. That investors have got plenty of choices of where they put their money in the world. There's plenty of investable propositions out there. So you need to show them what does New Zealand stand for? What's our country stand for? So we do a lot of that work to sort of set the groundwork, showing a country that is innovative, that cares for the environment, cares for people, a high trust environment, highly trustworthy and easy to do business. So these are all the kind of key messages that our team are transmitting to the world. Invest New Zealand, which is this new agency, but in fact, the investment part of it has been around for quite some time. Of course, there's always been foreign direct investment into New Zealand. We work with them a lot on what are the right messages to get out there. Invest in New Zealand because not only do you get value from it in terms of a financial return, but it aligns with your values. This is the country that we are and what we stand for. So for me, brand is actually one of the most important parts of investment attraction. Being able to show people what you stand for and who you are and what's sort of considered acceptable in your country. It's part of our international work.
Do you think the message has changed in the last few years, given the state of the world and
Um,
people's
I,
anxiety over what's going on in the world? I mean, as he said in his speech yesterday, there are 195 other countries looking for funding and investment, and so it's
yes.
a very competitive market. So I'm just wondering if you think the messaging has changed to investors about New Zealand because of the state of the world and the global environment.
I think I think that the New Zealand message needs to be adapted, I suppose, because of that. I mean, we can tell you through research. We've got research at the Wazoo that New Zealand is a highly desirable destination. We've seen it. We know that we're trustworthy. We've got all the data that says New Zealand's the easiest place in the world to do business and the highest transparency, least corruption, all those sorts of things. These are really important things for investors to get out
Yeah,
there. So,
sure.
and also peacefulness. We're very high up there in terms of countries that are peaceful. So these sorts of things are highly attractive. The
Mm,
challenge is always, have we got the size of deals that investors want? Are we a big enough proposition for them to come into the country? So you've got to put some real functional benefits as well, not just the nice to have stuff, but actually, be able to show people that they can get a return on investment. So I think the two things go hand in hand, a
mm,
values-based discussion about who we are and what we stand for and why we are different, and
mm.
as well and you can get a good return on your investment here.
Yeah. Now, on your website, I'm just going to show it to folks for a second here.
Good.
You have some amazing material, which is really helpful, obviously, to Kiwis who are looking for support to do business. You've got a toolbox, that you have a lot of equipment and tools, and as you say,
Yeah.
access to the firm. People can apply to use it. What does it require to apply to use the Silver Fern?
Yeah, well, the fern mark's kind of one of we call it a taonga, which is Māori for precious thing or a treasure.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really valuable, it's what the most recognized symbol of New Zealand globally. And again, when I say things like this, it's not just my opinion, it's data. Um, people recognize the silver fern as being from New Zealand, and it means something. It means, it's correlated with trustworthiness, country of origin of New Zealand, the beautiful environment that we come from, great food products, that sort of thing. So you need to therefore live up to that expectation. If we're going to let you use the silver fern and you have to join a licensing scheme to be able to use it, we'll
Mm,
check to make sure that your product or service is grown or designed or made in New Zealand.
mm.
So it's got to have some connection to this place. But
Yeah.
that you're a trustworthy, bona fide company that we can trust what you say and what you do. If
Uh-huh.
you're a food product, we look at make sure you're following all the food regulations and that you're at the right standards. So there's a bit to it in the background, but it confers a lot of value, as I say, particularly in some markets like the Asian markets. They really seek out products that have the silver fern on them because they know that it means that stuff. Food
Yes.
security, food safety, and even tastiness of food, etc., is really important. and the fern mark has become associated with that. So that's why we look after it so carefully.
Yes. And in your list, in your toolkit,
Mm.
you have images, footage, video stories,
Yep.
infographics, presentations. Tell us how your uh, members or followers
Yeah.
use this material.
Customers, we call them customers.
Customers.
Even though they don't pay us, it's all free.
Yes.
We call them customers, just I don't know, it's a tradition. Essentially, the idea there is, so if we create this toolkit, it's got, thousands of images and graphics, photos like this one, and beautiful video and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's all kind of on brand for New Zealand, and we license it in a way that means that smaller exporters can afford then to use it in their marketing. It's trying to lower the bar of cost bar for companies. So if you're a small exporter and you're trying to show that you're from New Zealand, you can download our PowerPoints and our images and mix it together with your own content and show people what New Zealand is.
Yes.
Um, yeah, that's the whole idea. And then there's also little videos and things like that which are credibility. So lots of people talking about New Zealand and why it's important to buy our products and services, etc. So all these things are basically tools to help particularly exporters, but not just exporters. Other people use them too, like tourism and universities and things, but helps them basically show who they are and where they come from.
And this gives them exposure, obviously, to people who are looking up New Zealand story from overseas.
Yeah.
Helps them get their message out there. There are some wonderful success stories, aren't there, on this
Oh, huge. Yeah, we've got a lot of,
stories of
I
New
mean,
Zealand.
many years of stories of, case studies and profiles. And again, if you're let's say, for example, you're a technology company, technology hasn't been something associated necessarily with New Zealand, 30 years ago because of the high association with tourism or with the primary sector.
Yes.
So if you're a technology company, then being able to download some case studies and say, hey, Mr. Prospective customer, did you know that Xero is a New Zealand company? You must have heard of Rocket Lab. That's a New Zealand space company. So
Yeah.
it gives them the credibility, and they can download stuff from our website to just showcase what
Yeah.
are the great things, so that they can then get kind of that benefit through association.
Yeah. So, what would you say to people who want to come to New Zealand to invest in New Zealand, who might be listening to this video around Asia Pacific or further
Yeah.
across the field? What would you say to them about first steps? Where should they go to get information to make their first, soiree into the country?
Yeah, I mean, to search out New Zealand, Invest New Zealand.
Mhm.
It was announced it's going to be a separate standalone agency, but today Invest New Zealand is part of the trade, part of New Zealand's international outreach. And
Mhm.
then you'll find there information about why New Zealand is a good place to do business. What is, say, high trust environment, very strong rule of law, intellectual property rights are well guarded, those sorts of functional things, but also then the types of companies that have been successful here in the past and why coming to a country like ours where it's a mature first world country with well-educated people, etc., great workforce. So Invest New Zealand, if you Google that, you'll find a lot of that sort of information. And then you often then pair that up with immigration. You might need to therefore not just invest in New Zealand, but you want to come and live here or be a migrant here. And so there's information around immigration as well that you can get to through that.
Hmm. We talked a lot over the last year about the productivity of New Zealand being reasonably flat in the last
Yeah.
couple of decades, and there's a lot more need for innovation, for strategy, for bigger thinking, and to get people, out of their comfort zone because they've got the car, the boat, the batch, and they really enjoy their lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so the Prime Minister apparently has asked everybody to double their exports with the
Yep.
hope that this is going to help increase the productivity or at least increase the percentage of exports against GDP, which has been flatlined
Yeah.
for some time. So what is the hope that Invest New Zealand is going to shift the needle on that? I presume you're involved in those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, foreign direct investment is a massive fuel, if you like, for growth. And
Mm,
I think the mission there or the acknowledgement there is that we need more foreign direct investment to help us build particularly infrastructure, but
mm,
also companies need investment, etc. And the New Zealand being a relatively small population, 5.5 million of people, just doesn't have the deep capital pools that you have in other parts of the world. And so the strategy behind this, of course, is to look at what other countries have done, Singapore and Ireland being two standouts where they've got really great FDI attraction engines, if you like.
mhm.
Um, And we share with both of those the same attribute of being a really mature first world country. So we're actually a really attractive place to invest into. But we've got to get that story out there better. We've got to tell the story of why New Zealand more and more so that we can actually attract the right sorts of people. So
Mm.
to me, it's a no-brainer. Now the job to do is to make sure that people actually understand not just why they should invest, but what they can invest in. And I think that's the work that's going to be done through Invest New Zealand more.
Definitely, because there are a lot of people who might look, as you say, look at New Zealand, think sheep, think agriculture, think primary industry. But we have a lot of other industries, both across Australia and New Zealand, that are quite world class and leading. I work across both countries and have done for many years.
Yeah.
And
Well, the secret to New Zealand's sort of export and innovation is niches. We are never going to be a volume manufacturer at scale like a China or India or Mexico or Brazil. We're just not in the nature of our economy. So we need to be, therefore, very excellent at the things we do. So we pick a niche and be very good at it. Things like our wine industry, we sell really high quality wine. Our food has to be, premium. Our technology exports, things like Fisher and Paykel Healthcare, the global leader in sleep apnea masks. Now,
yes,
that's not a niche that the big pharmaceutical companies are going to spend a lot of time in, but it's certainly
yeah.
something we can be very successful in. So that's kind of the motto is pick a niche and be extremely good at it and be high value. Do not let yourself be kind of commoditized or sell through price mechanisms.
So, what's the secret to getting a successful message, for example, as you just said, to
Mm.
being niche? If we just take Asia Pacific, a very close neighbor, the whole region is, the fastest growing region of the world. There's 50 something countries across Asia, and a large number of them are developed and others are developing. And the developing ones, of course, have got a high need for the types of products that we offer, and
Yeah.
especially around food and agricultural products and other manufacturing products as well. So if we can't do volume and we're going to do higher quality and therefore be slightly higher price than that they might get from other countries like India or China, how do we get that across as being a value proposition that people want to pay for?
Yeah.
It can't just be that we're just a beautiful country, have great weather, honest people.
No, I
Um,
mean
etc.
this is what you're describing is exactly what NZ Story is here to do is to create that narrative that sits alongside the great
Yeah.
weather and the beautiful country and the beaches. I
Yes.
mean, as I say, like that this is the investment that's been made in us is to help build that. Our challenge is not having a great story. We've got a fantastic story. Our story is getting it. Our job is get it out there. Like it's quite hard to get
Yes.
media attention globally for New Zealand. We typically get picked up for quirky stories on some American talk show hosts, late night show, and they can be fun, but they're not. We've got to make sure that there's more sophistication to the message, and so we have to invest in brand. Brand is a
Yeah.
big part of how countries create value for themselves, and
Yeah.
so I guess the whole investment into New Zealand story is to not only capture and grow the stories, but actually try and get them out there as much as we can.
Okay. And what are you able to share a success story with us? One or two success stories from, the people that you have helped over the last few years?
Yeah, well, we don't typically go to individual companies because we're usually looking at sectors and things like that. But the
Okay.
technology sector would be a good example where over the last few years, as mentioned, the technology sector in New Zealand the growth has exploded. They've done extremely well. So we partnered up with with the technology sector a couple of years ago and created a global campaign. And when I say global, I mean we don't have the money to buy, media in many, many markets, but we picked 6 international markets that we thought were good target markets for New Zealand, and we created a campaign called "See Tomorrow First." And that's the idea of it is that New Zealand is a country that is first in the world, literally, to see the sun every day. So that was playful in terms of being see tomorrow first, but also the fact that we see a better tomorrow. The technology sector of New Zealand, when you look at the companies that are in here and the products and services, they're typically good for the world, good for people. And we focused a lot on those sorts of stories of why, New Zealand's technology around the environment, sustainability, human health, animal health, whatever it might be. We picked stories like that and then campaign those into those markets, the 6 markets of Australia, China, Singapore, US, and then UK, and we
Mhm.
often add India and Europe, but depends on the budgets.
Mhm.
And basically, then we talk about stories of companies or stories of innovations that have come from New Zealand that are credible in those spaces, and that's a good example where you can then change perception. So people already associate New Zealand with clean, green, sustainable, etc. That's an association they already have. But you attach to that, the technology elements of it. Okay, here's some technology that is good for the environment, cleaning up waste out of the oceans, looking at, human health, etc., etc. And you actually then you can grow people's understanding and knowledge. So that's an example. That campaign, for example, we had, millions of views, and we did sort of events in the market, trade shows, that sort of thing, using this material from this campaign. But yeah, we do those sorts of things on a regular-ish basis, depending on the budgets.
Okay. Well, thanks, David. That's been a really insightful background to New Zealand Story, what it does for the New Zealand brand, and the fact that New Zealand was nominated the world's #1 brand leader in terms of its ability to market itself to the world. That's a really big accomplishment.
Yeah.
And it's really great to hear how a country goes about doing that and what it does for its businesses. And I'm sure other countries listening will get lots of insights from this story. But you've given me permission to talk a little bit about your own personal story, which, as
Yeah.
I said at the start of the video, I did come across your story on TEDx, where you were talking about your cancer journey. And I just wondered if it might be really helpful for people who might know someone with cancer or who are facing some, illness themselves, just to hear how you approach the whole challenge and got through the other side, because I know you have been very involved in trials with new
Yeah.
medications that might be interesting.
Yeah.
And just how has that shaped you as a leader and who you've become as a result of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. It's
Hmm.
obviously a big part of my life, and life intertwines with work all the time. So I'll give you the very short version of my story. Was that about 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer,
Hmm.
and had to go through a whole lot of treatment. The normal treatment is chemotherapy. But unfortunately for me, I had a particular type of lymphoma that didn't respond to the chemo. So I ended up being told I was terminal cancer, and I had less than a year to live, and it was all pretty bleak at one point. But I
Yes.
was very lucky in that I got onto a clinical trial in Boston, and it was very circuitous. And you should go and watch my TED talk if you want to learn about it, because it's an
Yeah.
amazing story.
Yeah.
But that clinical trial was a thing called CAR T cell therapy, which is an immunotherapy, very advanced treatment where you're basically genetically re-editing human immune cells to fight cancer. And I was lucky, massively lucky to be part of this program. And obviously it worked. Spoiler alert, I lived. Um, so that was 7 years ago. Now, and since then, I've been heavily involved back here in New Zealand in terms of bringing the same treatment to New Zealand, and particularly working with a research institute here in New Zealand who has developed their own version of it. And it goes to the New Zealand story,
Oh,
things intertwined, because we haven't imported someone else's. We've actually created our own version of CAR T cell therapy. And there aren't that many countries in the world where they've got the capability to do this. We just happen to have a cancer research institute that specializes in the immune system. So it's been a wonderful part of the journey to be able to help other patients, first of all, and then also to help raise money, because they're a charity. So we're always raising charitable donations for them to basically create this cancer therapy in New Zealand. Um,
fantastic.
yeah,
Well,
and of course for me it's a life changer. Like that 7 years ago, my life changed forever, mostly for the better, but it didn't feel like it at the time. That's for
I know,
sure.
I can imagine. Yeah. To
Yeah,
be
no,
told that you've got 12 months to live is I mean, I wouldn't know how to describe what that might feel like. I haven't been through it, but you have. And wow, what does it take to pull through that? And how do you learn from that and
yeah.
make sure that the rest of your life is, as good as it can be?
It's pretty galvanizing in terms of
Hmm.
making you focus on something. I mean, at the time you focus on getting better and trying to avoid the worst case scenario. But
Yeah.
then when I came through it, there was a period of sort of readjustment of life, because life is very different after you've been through something like that. And if you talk to other people who've been through, near-death experiences, or had real significant trauma, it affects everybody,
Hmm.
often in different ways. But for me, it was very much a sort of this galvanizing thing of saying, right, well, I better use the time that I've now been given,
Yeah.
and not in a mystical, weird way, just to, like, I think I feel a responsibility to help others, and to do what I can to accelerate the adoption of this technology, because it genuinely is life-changing, life-giving.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's I spend quite a bit of time on that, when I'm not selling New Zealand to the world. I'm out there actually trying to talk about cancer therapy and why it's important. And as I say, it sort of beautifully fits in with the New Zealand story because it is a story of high-tech innovation from a small country that's for care that cares about people, and that's a big part of New Zealand's brand is kind of looking after the people, looking after the environment. So the two things go together really nicely.
Exactly. So you have been instrumental in helping to bring the technology to New Zealand and for a similar solution result, to be in place here. What's next?
Well, we're at a stage now where we've got a phase 2 clinical trial that's underway here, and we're expecting that the results from that will be good. We hope they'll be good. The phase 1 trial was certainly good, and that will accelerate then the adoption of this treatment in New Zealand's health system. But even more than that, it will allow for other advanced cancer therapies to sort of piggyback on the work that we're doing to get into the health system as well. And it gives us an export market as well
I was
because
going to say, is that an export
it is exportable
export
product.
potential?
Yeah. CAR T cell product that the
Yeah.
Institute, Allergan Institute, has developed is absolutely intellectual property that can be licensed and sold around the world. So it's a really nice sort of closed loop in terms of my personal involvement.
Actually, that was the other key area that Christopher Luxon, the Prime Minister, outlined yesterday was the introduction of 4 new Crown Research Enterprises to help advance science, biotech, and other technologies to commercialize and get them into the market and to get them into exports. So now that he's opened the door for you, I guess that's a gateway to help you take your product to market. And
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, New Zealand's is in our bones, if you like, our DNA is innovation. But what we haven't always had is the investment behind it, the commercialization, the path to market, etc. So we've got what these new organizations will do is add some fuel to the growth that's already starting. So I think it's highly positive.
Yeah. And so here we are, 2025. Would you like to make a projection for 2030? Where would you like to see New Zealand? What would you like to see it achieve by 2030?
Well, 2030 is not that far away, actually, and we'll be 190 years old in 2030 as a country. So that's pretty exciting. I mean, we've got the essence, as I say, we're a first world country. We've got a highly educated population, relatively wealthy globally, but we could do better. And the things we can do better in are things like accelerating adoption of technology for productivity purposes. I saw a stat yesterday saying we're falling behind in things like AI. Like New Zealand's not as adopting AI as quickly as some other countries. So we could do things there. So adoption of technology for productivity. Part of that is like how you invest in the education system, the work that we do at the Ice House, for example, that you mentioned earlier, the organization I chair, that's teaching companies how to be better companies. And often we're teaching them about, how to run businesses, how to have higher aspirations and that sort of thing. So I think in 2030, what I'd hope is that you're seeing a country that's reaching its potential in terms of, a higher number of exports coming from the country, higher productivity, that our workforce is well educated, and it builds on the fact that we've already got some amazing assets here, a beautiful economy, a beautiful environment to be part of, very attractive to international visitors as well. So all these things should layer on top of each other, I hope.
Absolutely. Well, look, I do hope that you all your dreams come true. You're really passionate about it, very inspiring. But you're the leader of a company called New Zealand Story, and that's your everyday, isn't it?
It is telling stories.
Promoting the upside. So I think it's a really positive environment, and it suits who you are and what you can add to the country, and also your own personal story and the innovations in your cancer therapy is just fantastic to hear. And I just wish you well, and your innovation, I hope it goes viral across the world and it becomes a leading export product because
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be part of it. I mean, and this is a job that favours optimism, but I am a naturally optimistic person.
Yes.
And I can only see a positive future here.
Thank you so much for sharing the New Zealand story with us, David. All the very best for you and your team.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.